I've been watching the Brett Kavanaugh hearings and the galactic-level three-ring circus with great interest, and with equal measures of dismay and amusement. I was even, for a time, emotionally moved when I saw Kavanaugh rage back in his own defense, fighting mad, spitting defiance and bashing back against the politically corrupt forces that have targeted him for total and complete destruction. I've had a brief moment of pride and satisfaction when Lindsey Graham verbally cleaned the Democrats' clocks, shaming the disgraceful lot of them, railing at them in a fervor of righteous indignation that was much more credible, more believable than the over-the-top timidity displayed by Christine Blasey Ford. Her deer-in-the-headlights performance, calculated to project an image of a psychically wounded bare survivor of sexual trauma, instead just revealed a sad character. Indeed of faltering mental stability, but nonetheless consciously indulgent in damseling. A forlorn and fragile Nell, hiding behind a facade of helplessness, assuring the world that criticism, personal scrutiny, and direct questions would cause her irreparable emotional harm. And of course, she was treated by all parties accordingly and with deference. Of course, Ford's credibility, mental instability or no, isn't and never was the issue here. If it weren't her with the last-minute purely fantasized sexual allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, it would have been someone else. And indeed, once her claims have been put to rest, or rather, once the reality sets in that her fact-deprived, half-assed accusations are unlikely to stick to a man with Kavanaugh's connections and backing, then the Democrats will just move on to whoever's next on the sexual assault accusation bandwagon. When creepy porn lawyer turns out to be a dead end, they'll get another, and then another after that, until they manufacture something that sticks, or until he's sworn in as the next Supreme Court Associate Justice. But this, too, is beside the point. Something else went through my mind while Brett Kavanaugh bared his guts to the world, alternately breathing fire and recounting touching stories, like how his daughter wanted to pray for his accuser. Something else was looming there for me, above the din of accusatory, politically ambitious Democrats, and above Judge Kavanaugh's emotional pleadings for justice. It was my emails, or rather, 1,000 or so of them. I guess that's a fair enough, if conservative, estimate of the number of men I have heard from in the past 10 years, specifically regarding false allegations of a sexual nature. Men whose lives were being decimated by women they dated or worked with, by wives during a divorce, by women they had never heard of, and by women who they just met. These were men who had had the rug pulled completely out from underneath their feet, viciously and without warning. Men whose resources had been suddenly and quickly drained in frantic attempts to defend themselves, or simply to pay off women who were blackmailing them. Men who'd been fired the moment their employers got a whiff of an accusation, whose educational futures had come to a sudden and unceremonious halt. Men whose families had turned on them, whose friends had abandoned them, who'd been delivered beatings by white knights on behalf of lying women. Men who the world had left twisting in the wind the moment a filthy lie had been whispered from the shadows. Men who Brett Kavanaugh would not have given the time of day. That's the rub here, folks. What we've all been witnessing here, regardless of our political leanings, is little more than what I've routinely seen in my email inbox from the moment I publicly identified as a men's activist. At least 1,000 men riding my broke, powerless ass because they had nowhere else to turn where they even fantasized that someone would give a shit. Since that day, I emerged in the world as an evil MRA, and in between vicious attacks on my character and life, I've received those emails from an unending stream of men. Men who are shocked, bewildered, and aghast that they're being treated so unfairly. Men who are both outraged and wounded that someone, with no proof whatsoever, and often with exculpatory evidence abounding, can just call for the destruction of their lives and, by God, have it done. And underneath their outrage, of course, is the personal terror, the fear they've never known as they watch themselves being dragged screaming into a dark hole by forces they can't see or even understand. And scream they do, pleading for help from anyone who will listen, while men like Brett Kavanaugh look the other way and whistle. And so now what do we have? A socio-political psychodrama of conservative pundits and politicians, men and women who suddenly found religion about false allegations when one of them hit one of their Ivy League frat buddies. Good God, the irony. These coffeehouse conservatives, dripping with the self-serving indignation of convenience, have been the most egregiously complicit as the left built and refined an industry of weaponizing women's allegations, of weaponizing women. Men like the Me Too endorsing Senator Lindsey Graham, so eager to work for our approval, to fill our desire for conservative governance, but who failed completely at that aim. The reason for it is simple. Men, including politicians, are terrified of women. Men, including politicians, have no skills for dealing with women, no matter how abusively mendacious they are. Men, as they stand today, are weak and ineffectual. Just watch Judge Kavanaugh, with trembling lips and wet eyes, yet still remaining careful not to call out the woman who claims he tried to rape her while conveniently not being able to provide a date or location. And when and if he makes it through this gauntlet, this mob insanity triggered by vague, most dubious accusations, he will almost certainly wipe his brow in relief and then crow about how we all need to take alleged victims more seriously, no matter how flimsy the accusation. There, right there, there's your modern man, and he's a good fit with the modern woman. Women's rampant mendacity and their propensity to bully is positively correlated to men's willingness to put up with it. A case in point. Here is Senator Jeff Flake. In this clip, he's being confronted by a woman in an elevator shortly after he announced his intention to vote to send Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Senate floor for confirmation. Look at him. Look at this whipped puppy of a man, eyes downcast, head practically bowed in submission, as this woman shames and finger points at him and wails emotionally about how this is all about her, how the entire world is about her. There's something golden about this clip in that it actually captures a modern politician in a very genuine moment. This is Jeff Flake being who Jeff Flake really is, a beta cuck ready to be put on a leash by anything female with a stern voice. We got where we are because his compatriots are just like him. Sure enough, after this woman whipped him into shape, he obediently and obsequiously helped the Democrats secure a 7th FBI investigation into Brett Kavanaugh, handing his supposed opposition another Tom Robbins, standing before the bench waiting for the axe to fall. Another week to bludgeon a man and his family with weaponized womanhood. You might think this is the result of men, including men like Kavanaugh, embracing the malicious depravity of the Me Too movement for political reasons. That's hardly the case. Me Too isn't even new. It's just the contemporary branding on the left's half-century-old agenda to destroy men's personal and political power with the world's longest damsel routine. Me Too didn't start with Harvey Weinstein. It started with Marxist feminists in the 1960s who began in earnest to weaponize women against men. Me Too is just how they brought that effort to modern social media. So imagine how tickled I am to see the parade of outrage by conservatives about how the Kavanaugh affair represents a new low in politics, and how they worry about what this will mean for the future. And you've even heard some of them raise concerns about the implications of all this for our sons. Oh yeah, a new low. Indeed, what on earth does this mean for the future? I mean, that statement of concern alone is enough to make me want to throw up. Concern for the future is for idiots who have no awareness at all of the past or the present. Like I said, I've got an inbox full of emails from men who have already been utterly destroyed. And that was just from the incredibly small fraction of men who ever heard of me. Still, they are 1,000 men these suddenly indignant pundits and politicians never gave a damn about. And I can guarantee you 100% that as long as the victims remain male and outside the circle of elbow-rubbing jerks in Washington, they will continue with their wholesale indifference. I'm human enough that I feel bad for Brett Kavanaugh. I can imagine his storybook little life, his pattern of all things going right, has taken a horrible and devastating hit. But I refuse to forget that if the left gets their way again and he ultimately takes the final fall, that he will land on the bones of thousands and thousands of other men who he never gave a damn about and whose names will never be uttered by his supporters. The fact remains that they just don't care. So sorry, Your Honor. If you fail, you fail. If you fall, you fall. Sorry about that. I still want to tell you that I think you're a better option by far than the left. However, it doesn't mean that I'm not holding my nose when I support you. And that is it for another one of my talks. As always, I hope you've enjoyed, even if you haven't, and we'll see you next time.